Welcome. I'm Jessica Tietjen, and this is the Evolving to Exceptional podcast, where we talk about reaching peak performance in our workplaces, homes, and communities so that we can live our best life possible, an exceptional life. I want to welcome back our Evolving to Exceptional listeners to this week's episode of the podcast. We have a fantastic expert in coaching, Lynell Shattls, with us today. We're going to dive into a little bit the importance of community for specifically for leaders. But I think in general, the power and impact of community can be really important for people, especially right now and in the world, and where people feel really lonely and disconnected and isolated. Bringing people together around community can be so powerful. So before we get into that conversation, Lynell, would you tell our listeners just a little bit about yourself, who you are, why you do what you do? Just give us a little bit of background.
Yeah, awesome. I always wonder, I'm like, should I start with the beginning and go to the end, or the end and go to the beginning? So I'm currently a leadership coach, leadership and executive coach, working with the mid-level leaders, and love that space because this is a space that has such an impact on going up, managing up, and also delegating down. And so they are really key for making so much happen in the corporations. And where I came from, how I got to there is this road. I started off in accounting and corporate human resources and global roles. And then I worked in wellness for a bit and consulting. And so I can see this string that I pulled through there as to always connecting to the person and really taking care of the whole person. And that's a big part of my leadership coaching too, is that I coach the person, the whole person. And so that's a big part of it. And our newest adventure is a launch of a group coaching program to bring that community together, which is where Jessica and I started talking about that. So I just love the work that I do. I feel very fortunate to be able to play in this space. And I do feel like I'm playing a lot of times. And almost, I just can't believe that I found such a great fit for my skills.
I love it. And I would love for you to maybe tell us a little bit about what are some of the things that leaders come to you for? What is it that maybe precipitates their seeking out a leadership coach, and the challenges that maybe they're focused on or working on in particular?
Yeah, so there's a mixed bag. Some of my leaders are the top performing leaders and they want to get even better. And sometimes their companies will just put them up for that and say, I would love to offer you this coach. I say it's polishing the diamond. They're already really good, but they're probably prompting them to get to that next level. And so this could be, they may be newer in the positions. They might be working on delegation. They might be working on managing up. They might be working on hybrid team where some of them are in the office, some of them are not. They could have just gone through mergers and acquisitions. There's so many different things that bring people to that. But there's this not being alone and not trying to figure it out themselves. Because so oftentimes my clients are like, gosh, why couldn't have I figured that out myself? And so just seeing the value of having somebody from the outside. And that's a beauty too. Most of my clients, I get the gift of being their first coach that they've ever had, which I love. And second is that they are not working in an industry where I've worked before. And that's the great thing too, that I can just have that approach and that kind of from the outside where I don't try to jump in and know everything that they do. And I'm not a consultant by any stretch of the imagination. And I can have that space to hold for them and to help them figure out what's holding them back.
So there's two things you talked about there that I'd love to maybe dive into a little bit. The first is around the idea of being surprised that people couldn't figure it out themselves. Because that was like a really similar experience that I had when I first got an external coach. And it was probably over 10 years into my career before I did that. And I didn't realize that was a thing, even that people really did. I knew it, but I didn't really realize the value of it. And one of the things I've really discovered since that I like to hit on is that when it comes from like a neuroscience perspective, the way that our bodies wire up, our neural connections get created, prevent us from seeing the world and ourselves through any other perspective than the way that we've been wired. And so it's actually really appropriate that we can't necessarily do that work ourselves, that we can't necessarily identify it for ourselves. And that actually we really need that external perspective. We need someone else's kind of neural network and neural connections that can see us from that other perspective, because we're trapped in our own lens, seeing ourselves and our lives through that lens.
No, I think it's just invaluable that I can sit here from a perspective. I don't know my clients. And that's why we say don't ever try to coach your family or friends because you know too much about them. So having this place where you can just be curious. And I'm always asking, I'm just curious about this. This is what I'm hearing and this is what I'm seeing. And they don't necessarily see that, but I see such themes and I have such good, I believe, intuitive hits of what they're trying to say. I'm like, you didn't say this. Trust is coming up. And they're like, yes, I don't trust them to delegate kind of thing. And so really playing in that space where I can just observe. It's almost like if I were like looking through like a crystal ball, but I just I get the benefit of watching. Sometimes I'll tell them I'm in the audience, like they're in there, or they're in the ring, they're on the stage, and I get the benefit of just sitting here and observing and being able to reflect back to them what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, and it helps to like unlodge some things that are really stuck in there because they are in their own world, their own bubble, their own filter, and that's what I tell them too. I'm never going to tell you what to do because I haven't lived your life, I haven't lived your experiences, I don't have that filter, that lens of what makes you. And so for me to give you something and say, oh, you should do this, where's the buy-in? And then that's crazy. That's a consultant.
That was actually the next thing I wanted to maybe hit on a little bit is the idea of consultant versus coach and understanding maybe that role of a coach. Like, what is it when a coach comes in? What is it that you do when you say that it's different from a consultant, and maybe helping unpack that a little bit?
So that's typically, again, most of my clients, first time that they've ever worked with a coach is me. So lucky me. But I talk to them, even I'll start with what's a therapist versus a coach, because that's a question I get asked a lot of times, and letting them know I'm a business background, no, not a medical professional. And so that therapist is going to work from present to past. I dig into that, see where there's that trauma, maybe some PTSD, some things that are really holding them back, but really play in that space versus a coach. It's going to go from present to future. And that's going from good to great and seeing what that potential is. Not to say that we don't take a step back, because I oftentimes do. Jessica, tell me about a time when, getting curious because you've been successful in the past. Help me understand, because that gives them this kind of awareness and of what they've been going through. But so that's the coach. But the coach versus consultant, the coach is curious. I'm asking a lot of questions. If I'm not asking questions, something's wrong. I ask the questions. My clients are the ones that are spending most of the time talking in the sessions. The consultant comes in and just tells you what to do. I don't have the answers. I had somebody in a manufacturing role the other day, and they said, I don't know if you've worked with this. I said, I haven't, and you're lucky, because I can give you more of an objective viewpoint on what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing. I don't have to know how you make your widgets. And so that's a big difference versus a consultant's going to be paid to come in here, tell them what to do. And I will have clients, Lynell, just tell me what to do. And I'm like, no, I don't tell you what to do. So, I have to push back a little bit too, because they get uncomfortable. And so that's working through this fixed versus growth mindset too, of getting you into that learning and that fear to get to the other side of growth.
And what I think is interesting, and I would love your perspective on this, because I love how you distinguish that, is also this challenge, or at least I've seen it as a challenge, where we've tried to maybe talk to managers or leaders about becoming coaches themselves and about coaching their people. And not that that is necessarily bad in some instances. I think coaching can be really valuable, but I think it muddies the waters a little bit when it comes to external coaches and the value that external or career coaches can really bring to individuals. Because like you said, real coaching is more objective, right? It is, I'm coming in and I'm soliciting or asking questions to help you uncover your own insights and your own wisdom and some of those things. And when we try to get leaders or managers to do that, I think it can be really challenging, if not impossible for them. One, because they may not have the skill sets to begin with, but two, also because they're responsible for execution and telling as well. And they have that very subjective perspective, right? They're in it with that person. And when in my experience, I've really, tried to work to maybe distinguish some of that, of how do you, necessarily partner with people instead of just coaching or just managing, because of some of those challenges. I'd love to just get some of your thoughts on that and what you've seen as well.
Yeah. As you were talking, like the word I wrote down was agenda. I don't hold the agenda for those sessions. I tell the clients, you come with that agenda. I'm not driving that. And even the group coaching program that we have coming up that we're getting ready to launch, we don't hold that agenda. We're still coming back to each of those participants saying, what's the theme? What do we want to focus on this next time? Because we don't want to drive that agenda, because otherwise we're more consultants. So that's a big difference between that internal coach. But there's some benefits of the leader having some coaching skills. Some of the who, what, when, where, why, just be curious, like sitting back, because if they're asking their employee, what do you need to be successful? How can I help you? Getting those answers from their employee can help, but they have an agenda at the end of the day, because they need to drive them to a certain performance, to hit certain goals and metrics. in order to be successful for the company. And that is that big difference. Of even if I were an internal coach, I still have that kind of agenda. I'm hired by them, even though I'm hired many times by companies. It's just so beautiful because I do hold the agenda, that they put forth of where do we need to go today.
And it's interesting because you've been in HR too. I recently got in a conversation with someone who talked about HR being that internal coach for people and being that person that people can go to for that coaching. And having been in talent management HR for the bulk of my career, while I think in some instances that can be valuable, that there are limits to that because as that HR, as that talent management leader, you of course have information that people don't have. If you learn certain things about people in those sessions or in those spaces, your confidentiality requirements or your ability to remain unbiased in other conversations like succession planning or talent review type settings is going to be undoubtedly impacted, whether consciously or unconsciously, by those interactions. And I made the comment back that there's some danger in that and that it can be valuable. I'm not negating that an HR person can't do that to some degree, but there's far more value in giving people that external resource that really can bring that objective perspective, that really can create that wall of confidentiality and that safety for the person that's being coached to really meet their objectives and create that transformation that you want people to have and to experience. And that when you try to add that as another job on top of HR, which is already doing a whole lot of different jobs, I think it could be a recipe for some challenges.
Absolutely. The confidentiality hit that right on the head because that's a space I tell my clients right away. I'm like, you have that safe space with me. I want you to come in and share whatever you feel comfortable sharing. I'm never going to say, tell me your deepest, darkest secrets, but in the first session, oftentimes I do get some deepest, darkest secrets because I'm holding that space for them. They can tell right away that they can trust me, that like, I'm not going anywhere with them. I tell them, even though I'm hired by your company, I don't know who your boss is. I don't know who your peers are. I don't know who your directs are. And that is the beautiful thing, that these 360 results come back in and I hear this and I see this. I don't know who their people are, and I can really support them and give them that place just to explore and play through some things that they don't have. That, and especially like when you mentioned HR, like you and I both worked, and that's a crazy place to be in when you're like, who do I talk to? I was there before where I had a leader who I didn't trust. I didn't feel like he was ethical. A lot of things. And it was really difficult for me. And I was like, where do I go? I went to the EAP because I knew I had to talk to somebody. And at that point, I didn't have an option that I knew of to have a coach to talk through that. I think our human resources people could use coaches as much or more than anybody else because they need that place to just explore that. And I do have some HR leaders as well too. And I love playing that space. Yes, I worked in that, but I have a heart for that too, because I know there's such a need.
And I absolutely agree with you. I think you hit it head on. And I would encourage anybody in HR to get a coach. I think having that external perspective can be extremely valuable and helpful in a space that you can go to. And I also think, and just for those that are maybe familiar with some of the work that I do, I think it's a great distinction between when we do development or we have a particular objective, right? So we're going to develop leaders and a certain set of skills. There's a reason why you want to go through maybe a program or a system where you really are getting that like specific education or that specific development and training on the what, why, and how of being a leader and doing specific things. And then when it comes to then coaching, now I'm really looking at what are those challenges that I'm experiencing as a leader? What's coming up for me in this situation? How am I navigating and working through those? And really understanding the difference and the value that they both bring at different points of kind of your development cycle. So let's get into your community and the importance of community around this development. We've talked a little bit about the one-on-one, but let's talk a little bit about why there's an additional value to doing this kind of coaching in a group setting. Because if people aren't familiar with one-on-one coaching, then group coaching is probably even more like, how does that work? And how does that bring value? So maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So our Thriving Leaders Connection is building this community, bringing leaders together, the mid-level leaders that are struggling through some things, that want to have some development. So some of my former clients are coming into the group coaching program as well too, because they've experienced one-on-one with me. And to let them know, again, the biggest thing is they are not alone. There's lots of people. And that's what I reassure my clients. the one-on-ones already. It's to say that you're not special and unique, but you're in this space that a lot of other leaders are struggling with this too. But there's maybe not that safety to feel that they can have that conversation within their company. And so this group is going to be people, leaders from all different companies versus a team would be, I was doing some coaching for, like I said, the whole HR leadership team. And so they're going to learn from that. And again, the diversity of people in this group too, they don't have to be all in the same space. They can see that there's this theme. I first started thinking it was going to be men primarily that I wanted to work with because I felt like men weren't sharing as much about what was going on, the struggles, because there's a lot of those stereotypes, my husband included, that you just have to know it all. But this group that's coming together is mostly going to be, I think, I don't know, it might still be mixed. We're still enrolling into the program, but building the community that they are not alone. They can discuss these themes, these topics that are important to them, but they can learn from one another too. And so they can see maybe different perspectives of other people too. And so Lisa and I, my partner we're doing this program together, we don't want to become consultants to tell them what to do. We have ideas from our corporate experience, but we want this to be self-led, and we feel like they will learn so much from one another too going through this. But the other thing too is that we know that there's still the benefit of one-on-one. So they will also get one-on-one sessions with us, including we're also doing, I know you and I've talked about the Energy Leadership Index assessment tool. So they're going to be having the benefit of that too, to see where their energy is as their foundation.
Well, and you know what I love? So a few things, again, from like the neuroscience perspective, and I know you're probably familiar with some of these things too, is that we know that we learn a lot through our mirror neurons, through how we watch and see what other people do. And so that when we either observe or hear about someone else's experience, the same parts of our brain light up as that person's lighting up. And so when we watch someone else get coached on something that we relate to, or that maybe we've had similar experiences with, those parts of our brain are also lighting up. And so we're really able to learn through other people's experiences, through what they've accomplished. And given our own limitations in what we can experience ourselves and the opportunities that we have to have those experiences, by getting into I think that group setting, you're going to get so much more exposure to these other stories, examples, some of which you might relate to, and some of which maybe you've not encountered yet, but now you have a context for when you do encounter that, or when that does come up. Hey, oh, I remember being coached on, or I remember this person's experience and their insights and what they shared. And then I'm able to maybe utilize that. And so there's a lot of value in terms of those connections or the learning that comes through those opportunities to observe one another.
Yeah. And even when you're saying that too, this connection doesn't have to just stay in the Thriving Leaders Connection TLC. We're saying, giving them a little TLC. That we want to forge that they have these connections that can take beyond where we are in this session. Because I don't know about you, but when I was working in human resources, I would go to some SURE meetings, I would do some things, but I wasn't doing a whole lot of networking. I wasn't doing a lot of things because I was busy with my family and with work. And so that development outside of there, but we're building this, that you have a friend, you have somebody that gets you. You're going through similar things. And that's why we want to start off with the energy leadership, because we want to have this foundation of what energizes them too. So I can't wait to see just how the synapses are just shooting off connections with them as the energy starts to rise in different ways in these sessions too, because I've seen that in my own one-on-one coaching sessions. There's one client I always think of that he and I were like getting really animated, and my husband was a different part of the house. I had my AirPods. And he was like, what was happening on that? I said, because we were bouncing off of each other. We were just, this energy was really going in a great way. And I think about that with the clients too, that are in this session, that they will take so much away from this that they have no idea. We don't even know. That's the beauty. Like I don't have it prescribed. I don't have this all figured out. And that's the great thing, because we're open to opportunity of what's going to come out of this.
I think that's so powerful. And I think when it comes to that energy, one of the other things we know about the human body is that our heart rate and our brain frequencies will extend out to those that are around us. And so we will sync up. We'll actually sync up with those that we're interacting with, and our nervous systems will sync up. And I always like to say we're going to attune to either the most dysregulated or the most regulated person in the room. And so when we create these coherently balanced coaching community-based spaces, it provides opportunity for that level of coherence and that level of synergy and connection to take place. And I mentioned this at the beginning, but there's definitely a deficit of that human connection right now. We know that the Surgeon General came out with a concern around loneliness and the impact of that. There's also reports around parents and the level of stress that parents are enduring, which of course many leaders are also parents. And so having that kind of community space is actually a huge reducer of and balance of the nervous system and our ability to connect to and relate to other people.
Yeah. And just as you're saying that too, it's such a reminder. And I experience this all the time with my sessions. There are clients that they probably never heard. They don't get to speak these things. They don't have to have the opportunity to hold this space, even if they have a spouse, if they have a partner, they have the coworkers. But who takes the time to spend 45 minutes to an hour just talking about themselves, working through their stuff? Because we start to feel like it's selfish. Like, just move on. We're in this type of society where we're like, just keep moving, just keep moving. It's like, no, I want you to slow down to go fast. And that's a big thing that I talk about with my clients. I want you guys to get to that action, but I want you to slow down to figure out what's been making you pause. What's been that like roadblock, if you will, that's what's holding you back. If you could figure that out, you would have done this all yourself. So just holding that space for them. And I think that's going to be the cool thing too with coming to the group coaching is that I expect that our clients are really going to look forward to this time and space, and making it a priority. And that's the biggest thing too with coaching is that you make it a priority to
Mm,
spend that time completely focused on it, because the more you're in there and in that zone, the more you're going to take away from it.
I love that. And I actually just wrote and put out an article that kind of comes to this conclusion around the importance of community. And especially in a world that's pretty polarized right now, where people have very polarizing perspectives on things, the only way that we really expand our perspective or really understand other human beings' perspectives is to be in community with people who are different from us. And there's not as many opportunities for that. We tend to create communities that are pretty homogeneous, where we are pretty similar, especially within companies. There's a certain culture, there's a certain type of values that they hire to or that they bring in. And when we can create these kind of cross functional, very cross company, diverse industry type communities, it creates that opportunity to both find what is similar, right? Both connect to where we can relate to one another, but also learn about things that maybe we wouldn't otherwise be exposed to or have an understanding of. And especially for leaders in the world today, I think that's a really important skill set for them. And it's a really important thing for them to develop is the ability to hold conflicting perspectives or to be exposed to a variety of perspectives and experiences rather than have a limited my way is always the right way kind of mentality. And so I think there's a lot of growth and development that comes from just that level of exposure and that opportunity to see those other perspectives.
Yeah, a couple of things came up as she was talking. One is, and it was something that I just became exposed to here a couple months ago when I was at a conference that's constellation coaching. And so this idea of seeing what's the same, what's the difference, where are our viewpoints? And so you could put people on a line and you could say, okay, we could do age, we could take experience, we could take number of direct reports. We could say, what are our viewpoints on having an EAP? And so like people that are closer and everybody should have one, or I have strong opinions that they shouldn't. And so we're just seeing that and being able to embrace like we're different. We don't all have to be the same. And that's going to be the beauty of thing too, is that we might trigger some people. And I don't mean I think it's a good thing. I'm just going to say that because it's a safe container we're providing for them to see and to be aware of why was it triggering for you? Where's that coming from? And that might be something that comes up in their individual coaching sessions with us too, just to explore that space. And that's why I don't want to we want the group, but we also want that intimacy of the one-on-one to dig into that too, because we all come with different filters and experiences in life, things that have shaped us and our family and what have you. So that's going to be really good for us to see what comes out of that. Because again, it's their time. We don't have this pre-prescribed, okay, Jessica, now when you go into one-on-ones, we'll cover this and this. Nope, that's not what we're doing. I love that because I don't like to be cookie cutter. I like to have variety. I like to just to honor the people where they are.
And I love what you said about triggers, because when I think of triggers, anytime we're triggered, it's really an opportunity for growth and exploration, right? It's in
Mhm.
our triggers that we
Yeah.
identify a pattern or something within us that is uncomfortable or is incomplete. And
Mhm.
it's an opportunity to then say, how do I want to rewire this? Or how do I explore this in a way so that I can understand why this is triggering? Because triggers are always an indicator of an opportunity for a lesson, an opportunity for growth. And so I love that you brought that up and are providing kind of space for both, right? Here it comes up, but then there's also space to then let's explore that for you in a safe one-on-one type environment as well.
Yeah, we're recreating what the world is because we don't know who's all going to be there and what their backgrounds are. And so this is what we have, right? When we come into a company, we might have got to cherry pick our staff, but more often than not, we are given some people, like we move into a position and there are people around us. And so that's life. And so for us to say, oh, we want them to all be this certain type of environment. No, because even in your company, somebody's going to come from a different background and you're having to scratch your head and going, why are they in this role? How do they, I hear that all the time from my clients that maybe have new bosses that are trying to figure this out of like, why are they in this? And so getting them that comfortable with exploring that and talking through those sort of things of what's coming up for them.
So you also had mentioned that you do this energy assessment.
Uh-huh.
Tell us a little bit about how that comes into play and the role that how people use that in development with you.
Yeah. So we start off with the Energy Leadership Index assessment. So this is like a 20-minute assessment tool, not like anything else I think you've dealt with before. So you might have done Myers-Briggs, you might have done DISC, Hogan. There's again, strength. There's so many different ones. But what this assesses is how we show up on a normal day, what our energy is, and how we show up under stress. They're very different things, right? And the more we become aware of our energy levels and the energy that we have within us, we can see and realize that we are at choice of we're in control of what we do, how long we stay in that space. I can tell you from the first time I did this assessment to where 2 years later, I just had such a greater awareness of myself and partly those triggers. There's certain situations where I go to think I'm a mom. And so a lot of times it's level 4 kind of being of service. That's it. That's my DNA. I was in human resources DNA. I'm a military spouse. That's my DNA, this level 4. But what happens? I'm just throwing you the middle of the road. But when I start to see opportunity and I start to rise up and see like such a win-win, opportunity and joy, like where my company is right now, things are just coming left and right. It's because my energy is vibing at that. And I'm seeing lots of good things coming in. But it's not to say that there isn't a time and place for other energies as well, too. When you're maybe going through grief, maybe you've lost your job, maybe you've lost a loved one. That is a human part of you that you just to spend there to maybe even feel like a victim. What if somebody just lost a spouse going into the holidays? And so that's not a bad thing. We have all of this within us. And so we go and we play in there. And I oftentimes tell my clients too, so if you're one that's always vibing at a really high space, but then you're down here, that's probably to get somebody's attention. And not that you're like seeking attention per se, but they're going to say, you know what, Jessica's not usually that. She's really upbeat. What is going on? And so they're going to spend some time there. And then going up from that is that's more maybe victim apathetic, kind of lethargy because of what they're working through. But then you might get mad, like, how dare this person leave or they fire me, this and that. So that gets them into action sometimes too, because they're fueled with kind of these emotions. Again, not a bad thing. But we know that people might not be comfortable with that. So if somebody has a lot of fire in them and that was said, just push that underneath the rug growing up, that wasn't safe kind of space. So we know that those energies can trigger for people too. You might then go to a place of like responsibility. Okay, I can say that from a military spouse perspective. Okay, so we're moving again. My husband's career is taking us to a new location. It's okay because it's good for him. And it just doesn't do a lot for me just to play this space. And then I go, sticking with that kind of theme, I go into this service. Okay, we've moved 4 times in 6 years. I need to go into that, take care of my kids, get them in the right schools, get them to the doctors, what have you, into that. But when I start to go up into this place of peace, that's when doors start opening up for me, like a level 5. And I go to just the confidence and calm and really loving with the space I'm in. And then you get to this place like joy and just fearlessness and just everyone always wins, like a level 6. And then level 7, I would say, is like this. It's harder to miss, kind of to attain and to sustain. And that's because if you think about this place where you were just like, maybe if you've had a child, like when you were in that space of everything is perfect in this world, I have this beautiful human being that just came to me and everything is great, but you don't stay in that so long because you're not relatable in this, I say, sitting on the cloud and the levels of it. But what we know about our energies is we have them all within us. So I can go show you probably, 3 or 4 of these in a day's time. I might go to there because of what's going on, because maybe something triggered me, because maybe my doubt, maybe my confidence was up, lots of things. And so what that does for us is to have a common language of energy when our group is coming together. and that we can talk about that. And they can start to observe that. And even having this brief conversation, I bet once you get off the podcast today, you'll start to think about energy and how you see that in your house. And maybe you see that with other people you come into contact with during the day. And it gives you this perspective to let that judgment go to, and to know that we always know that somebody's like road rage. Well, we don't know what's going on in their life. We don't know what's happening.
Mhm.
I think that the more I've matured, the more I've deepened into my coaching practice to let that go. It's a beautiful place.
Well, and I think something you said in there I think is really important, which is that there's not a wrong energy and a right energy. And I think sometimes we tend to think of things in that way. This is the right way to be. This is the wrong way to be, especially with emotions and different feelings that we have. I want to feel happy. I don't want to feel sad. I want to feel, joyful. I don't want to feel angry. And the reality is we have to experience the spectrum of emotions, and there are appropriate times for those. So I love that you pointed that out, that when we're in grief, that those lower levels of emotions are appropriate responses. And I think it's important because if we don't experience those, then I always like to talk about emotions are energy in motion. And if we don't move them through the body, if we don't allow ourselves to feel and express them, then they can become stuck and they can cause pain, cause illness, cause sickness in our bodies because we try to store them or suppress them or not feel them. And I'm certainly the first to admit and authentically say this has been a huge challenge for me. I'm one of those people that grew up, I don't want to feel sad. I don't want to feel angry. I'm just going to suppress that. I'm just going to push that away. And eventually that catches up. So I love the idea that you can move through these different levels of energy and then recognize where you generally find yourself. And I love that you said, I think you said both when you're at your best and when you're, how did you explain that?
So your energy on an everyday basis and when you're under stress.
I,
So
yeah, and understanding like what that looks like for folks. How do you use that then? How do your clients then use that in their daily? Is this just about awareness, or is there some like action around it as well?
it's action and there's choice. I think when we start to open up that lens and say, this is what's going on, and they start to see that, oh, I'm going there. Like some of my clients, we don't use it as much, but you can even use like an app with this after we do the debrief that you can start to have this awareness of, oh, I'm procrastinating doing this report. What's going on with that? And help you understand like what's influencing you, where your energy is, what's happening for you. And so just having that awareness for themselves, they can also see that in just across the board. They look at their satisfaction across the board, from finances to relationships to career to family to work-life balance. And they can just see how this energy, it's all a part of us every day. This is how we show up. And so having that awareness for them. And that's why we wanted to make it the foundation for our group as well, too, so that we can have that language and they can start to have that aha and that awareness. So again, it's just, with my clients, it gives them some clues as to maybe some stuff they need to work on, not need, but what maybe want to. I'm going to change that word to want. I don't tell them what they have to do, but I'll say, okay, I'm going to put a pin in this. This might be something that you want to work on. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, again, I'm not driving that agenda, but I'm seeing this. This is, especially when I'm debriefing, this could go on for 3 hours, but I try to keep it to about an hour and 15 because there's so much richness in there. And sometimes there's disconnects. And that's the part I love, the analytics of it, that I can start to see. I'm like, you answered it this way, but this, like when I look at some of the responses, it's a disconnect. And so it opens up this awareness for them too, where some of it's really like, I did a debrief for another coach recently, and hers all connected because she's such a high awareness. So that went pretty quick because things weren't disconnecting. But those that are like, you answer one way, but then you answer something a different way, it's okay. I'm curious because this is coming up for us. And what does this really mean?
I love that. I think it's incredibly powerful, and I can just see how much value probably your participants are going to get out of this experience. As we maybe bring this to a close or bring this episode and wrap this up, do you have any final thoughts or words of wisdom or things you want to offer to our listeners around any of the topics we've talked about?
Yeah, I think it's just seek community. And if you don't find that there, don't be afraid to ask. I'm famous for that. Like, I'm going to create community here in my neighborhood. I just moved here this summer. Is if you don't feel like that there is community, create that and find somebody else that you have something in common with that makes it safe. And that's why we're creating this space here, is to help you to figure that out and not go alone. I think that when I look back over my career, There was not coaches. I was going through the dark, and I was like, I ended up pretty good, I think, but I could, I started some of my path because things weren't so good. And so I just was like, I got to change something, but just letting people know that they don't have to do this alone. They can
Mhm.
just stop the suffering, stop the pain. There was something that they said, I was going to do this beginning of the year. Here it is, November, almost December, and I haven't done it. Don't go alone. Let somebody help you. And we're wired so much. Just take care of yourself. Just go. And it's not a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of strength if you can go and ask for help, whether
I
it's a
love
therapist or whether it's a coach.
I love it, and I couldn't agree more. And I hope and wish that more organizations will make that investment for people and begin to see how much value bringing in external resources to help support, especially I think HR leaders like ourselves. I think sometimes in HR, we think we can do it all ourselves and we can make it all happen and we can be the person. And I think recognizing that actually we can be better if we partner externally, that will free us up and be able to give more to the things that are most important to us is a powerful step change for organizations and individuals to make. So, if people want to get in touch with you, how can they connect with you? How can they reach out to you?
Probably the best way is through my website. So that's Lynell Shattls. So LYNELSHATLS.com. That's my website. I am Leap of Faith Coaching, but the website is my name. And that's going to be the best way, I think, for you. You can find me on LinkedIn as well, too. So if you just search Lynell Shattls Coach, you can find me there as well. And I just love the opportunity to talk to people, even if it's just, hey, I'm curious about this. Let's spend 30 minutes together and discuss, is this a fit for you? And that's what I have with some of the folks that I've already worked with. And they're like, I want to see if this is a fit. And we just play in that space and see. You don't have to have it all figured out. I don't have it all figured out. And yeah, just reach out.
I love it. And I appreciate so much you coming on and having this conversation. I think it's so valuable and so important. And I love what you're doing. So thank you so much, Lynell, for coming on and sharing all of your wisdom and your insights with us. To all of our listeners, I just want to close with the idea of finding yourself a community, whether you're a leader or an individual, wherever you are, to find a community that fits with the things that are most important to you and to join that community so that you can get that growth and that development and that exposure. And you can find those connections that are meaningful and important and impactful for you in your own growth and your own development. And so, as always, I just want to remind you to keep evolving, keep growing, keep rewiring those neural pathways so that you can live your best life, an exceptional life. And I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day and week, and we'll be back with another episode next week.